Judge Tommy Fowler joins us today to talk about autonomous vehicles and the impact they could have when it comes to laws. Judge Fowler, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, before we dive in, I wanted to get a little bit of your background, how you got your start, and what it was that made you want to get into the criminal justice system.
Wow.
A loaded
Turn
question.
clock there. I graduated from the University of Arkansas School of Law in 1998. Came back to Northeast Arkansas to Jonesboro and started private practice. Was hired as a deputy prosecuting attorney in 2001. So I kind of had the best of both worlds. I had a private practice and I was also a deputy prosecutor for our county. So over my lifespan of trial work, I've prosecuted over 20,000 cases. I mean, I've tried non-jury, jury, I've tried state, I've tried federal cases. I've just been all over the board. Uh, I've had a really good life in the practice of law. And in 2015, we had an untimely death of a circuit judge here in Northeast Arkansas. And so I was appointed by our governor to fill out that term. Well, in Arkansas, you cannot run to succeed yourself. So I took this position knowing it was a dead end position. There were no other circuit judge positions that I could run for. But the court I had been the deputy prosecutor in for 15 years, we had a judge who was retiring, so I ran for that seat. It was a contested race, and all judges in Arkansas are elected, and so I had a contested race and won, and have been reelected ever since. So I have started my ninth year on the district court bench, but I've got 10 and a half years in total.
Wow, impressive.
You recently, and this is the reason we reached out to you actually. People may be wondering kind of what the link is here with trucking and whatever we're talking about here, but you recently gave a presentation to law enforcement and others that our foundation director, Andrew King, actually told us about. And the subject of that presentation that you gave was on autonomous vehicles, and really the impact that that technology could have on Missouri's impaired driving laws. So that's a very focused kind of area right there that we're talking about. But clearly, this is something that has been on your radar for a while now. Can you kind of talk about what led you, I guess, down that long path to that presentation and how this sort of kind of came to mind at first?
It's actually a funny story. And I start every presentation off talking about how this came about. But I was sitting on the couch watching the Super Bowl about 3 years ago, and the GMC Super Cruise commercial first came on, the one where they start with the clapping of the hands, the We Will Rock You" song.
Yep, I
And
remember it.
so I'm watching that, and I watch the gentleman behind the wheel, punch the button to activate Super Cruise, and he takes his hands off the wheel, and the truck continues to drive. And the truck is pulling a trailer in one scene, and it's got motorcycles in another scene. And in one scene, it actually overtakes a vehicle. It passes on the left and then merges back in. And I was just sitting there thinking, and I looked at my wife and I said, was that guy in actual physical control of that vehicle from an impaired driver standpoint? And my wife, who's a retired judge, looked at me and she said, "You are such a nerd." And I said, "Yes, I get that. I resemble that remark, but I'm a recovering prosecutor for 15 years. That's just how I think." And so I started looking into Arkansas's laws. And to be honest with you, what I found scared me and shocked me because in Arkansas, it, you have to either be operating or be in actual physical control. So if law enforcement doesn't see you actually operating the vehicle, we have to turn to the definition of actual physical control. And in my state, which is a bright line rural state, two things have to occur. One, the key has to be in the ignition, and two, the driver has to be behind the wheel. So that's normally when I ask everybody in my audience by a show of hands, how many of you still have a key that you put into the ignition and turn? And
Not me.
those numbers continuing to go down, down, and down because most people now are a push button, key fob. Some, I think Rivian is biometric. And so your body is the key when you get in. I think some Tesla drivers, the key is their cell phone.
Hmm.
And so in my state, you don't meet that definition. And our last case law was back from 2006, which addressed this. And we had a couple of Court of Appeals judges who wrote dissents saying, this thinking is years old. And they really encouraged our Supreme Court to take the case up, which they did not. So the only way for the law to change is going to be if a case gets brought up, which I doubt any defense attorney is going to bring one, or unless our legislature changes the law. So that's what got me started. And 2 weeks after I first made this presentation to our district judges in Arkansas, I come back to Jonesboro and I have a domestic violence case in front of me. Well, it started off as a domestic violence. I had an estranged husband who called the Jonesboro Police Department because his estranged wife was at his condominium and he didn't want her there. So when they pull up, she's sitting behind the wheel of her Mercedes. The driver's side door is open. Her feet are outside the vehicle. The car is running, but they come up to investigate a domestic, not investigating an impaired driving case. So only after they get her out of the car and start speaking to her do they notice the odor of intoxicants coming from her. And then it switches. It switches to an impaired driving investigation, and they end up charging her for driving while intoxicated. Well, at trial, the state could not prove their case because no officer saw her operate the vehicle, and it was a push button start. So there were no keys in the ignition, even though the engine was running. And I had to direct a verdict of not guilty for the defense. And so that's what really got me started. And I've been asked to come states all over the country, including Hawaii, to present on autonomous vehicles. And so every state that I go to, I do a deep dive into their impaired driving law and definition. So what I'm giving them is how technology advances may impact their investigation and their impact in impaired driving laws. So that's long story short of how I got to Missouri. Uh, I had the gentleman who invited me had seen me present out in Utah and asked if I would care to do it for law enforcement. And I said, not a problem at all. And so then that's how I met your board of director.
Nice. That is, yeah,
Yeah.
fascinating. I think a question I could see a lot of our listeners having right now is thinking, well, why don't they just change the law? That's obviously not something that's done overnight or an easy thing to do.
True. And here's the thing. As a member of the third and equal branch of government, as a judge and in the judiciary, we do not make policy. We enforce the law. So that falls in the lap of the legislature. And I have made presentations for legislators. I have made presentations for state police and for other law enforcement. And in every state that I go to, it is an interest. But like you said, Ashley, it is a slow moving process. Sometimes there could be lobby interests that get in the way. Sometimes it could be, well, we only have so much time in the legislature, and this is really not our main focus. I really think more light needs to be brought onto the pitfalls that there are in everyone's law, because I say this all the time. Every traffic law that we have assumes a human driver. That's no longer the case.
And that's what I was going to ask you too, is because again, impaired driving, that is a uh, certainly a concern. I think that all of us would have. We don't want people behind the wheel who have been drinking or taking drugs or whatever it may be. the bigger picture here, and I think the message that you're trying to convey to those people when you're giving that presentation and what you're saying to us here now is that this horse has left the barn and it's it's running
It's
and
not trotting. It is in a full gallop. That is correct.
yeah, it's running and it's in the field. It's it's on its way to being gone. And we're all just kind of sitting here watching it, run off, and no one seems to be chasing after it. And I'm kind of mixing metaphors or analogies here, but the idea is that, you know, this technology is taken off, and we are still operating on these laws and regulations that have been on the books for decades, if not longer in some cases. And that's your concern here, I think, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because, there are six different levels of autonomous vehicles, and if now is probably as good a time of any to get into those.
Yeah.
So, level zero is no automation. So, that is your 1964 F-150, three on the tree. Air conditioner, roll the window down. You want the heater, roll the window up. You want to be entertained, then you maybe on a clear night in Northeast Arkansas on your AM radio, you could pick up Wolfman Jack being broadcast out of Chicago, and all your young drivers, that's going to go over their head. They're not going to know who Wolfman
What's
Jack
a
is.
radio?
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 AM.
Yeah.
Level one is driver assist. And I use the example that's actually, my wife's 2017 Acura MDX, and that's 2017 technology. And that is driver assist in that if I start to cross over the center line, it bumps me back over. If I start to cross the fog line, it bumps me back over to keep me in the lane. If I'm too close to the car in front of me, it'll slow me down. If I'm impeding traffic, it'll speed me up. Those are examples of the simple driver assist from a level one. Level two, obviously GM, Super Cruise, Ford, Blue Cruise, but the most known level two would be our Teslas. But that is the kind of funny thing about all this is, when they first started, their marketing was autopilot, and they had to change that. NHTSA, after several incidents of fatalities and some of their crash data, NHTSA got onto them and they had to change. So now you won't see autopilot. You'll see self-driving because level two still requires a human to be behind the wheel, ready to take over because you are still responsible for the car. It can drive under certain conditions and certain situations upon appropriate highways that are clearly marked, those types of parameters. But it can't do everything at all times, but it can do an awful lot. One of our Supreme Court justices here has a Tesla, and he always likes to talk to me about this topic. But he was telling me he drove, 600 miles over a course of about 4 days and probably didn't touch the steering wheel for 15 minutes.
Wow.
And when you look at GM's map, they have over 450,000 miles of authorized road that GM Super Cruise technology can drive hands-free with the driver being alert and aware and ready to assist when necessary. That's just level two.
Hmm.
When we get to level three, that's conditional automation. Right now, that is just Mercedes-Benz, and they are authorized for level three in Nevada and in California, though they will tell you they're ready to roll their technology out nationwide. It's just the states and their laws are not ready for it. So with the Mercedes-Benz level three vehicle, it does everything for you. You are still behind the wheel, ready to take over in an emergency situation, but it takes care of everything. And like I said, that technology is out of the barn. It's ready to roll. It's just that the states aren't ready. Our next level would be level four. That's high automation. So in a high automation vehicle, there's still a steering wheel, there's still a gas pedal and a brake pedal, but you only drive if you want to drive. You are
Hmm.
not necessary. The car can take over all functions. And even in emergent situations, the vehicle takes care of itself. And a good example of that would be the driverless taxis, the Waymo and the Cruise that we see in California, that we see in Arizona, and now in Texas, I believe. They're operating there. And then finally, full automation. I tell folks, when we get here, I'm going to buy stock in Dramamine because you are a true passenger. And so the mock-ups of those vehicles are the cabin is just seats facing each other. And so traveling backwards, I think we may have a difficult time getting used to that. And so those are the six levels. Even though 0 through 5, there are
Right.
six levels of automated vehicles. And like I said, three is on the road right now. We see four in the driverless taxis. So that technology is there. And I think by the end of the decade, we'll be ready for level 5.
Wow.
Yeah, I
I know
think you're
there's a
right.
lot of information, but that's getting it all out there for you.
Yeah. Well, no, it's super helpful too, because again, this has all happened so quickly. I mean, over the past just couple few years, just, the robotaxis you're talking about in California and Austin and these other places, they're relatively new. Let me play devil's advocate for a moment here,
Sure.
because throughout human history, anytime there's been a new technology, a new thing that's come along, you've had a segment of the population that has expressed uneasiness or concerns about this or that. This feels different to me. I wasn't around, 100 years ago, but this feels different in that we are giving full control to something else. But is there, I guess, a side of this that you can see from a legal perspective where, um, it will eventually work out in terms of the law catching up with all of this. I guess that's a concern you have, is that we are so far apart from the technology taking off and where the law is, that are you worried they're never going to kind of come together? Is that your concern here? What's your message, I suppose?
No, I kind of think we're in the trough of disillusionment right now. And so once technology first comes out, there's that peak. Oh, everything is going to save the world, and then we start to realize, wait, humans were involved here, so there's some problems either in the implementation of it or the design of it or both. And so we kind of fall into that area of, man, I don't know if this is ever going to work, but slowly we will get to that plateau of where things are good. And this is kind of where I see us going. As we are an aging society, and as we still continue to want to have quality of life, think about the abilities for Americans with disabilities, or as we age, our eyesight becomes um, poorer, our hearing is not as well. And so, with autonomous vehicles, that could still allow us to have a good quality of life, to not have to rely on somebody to come pick us up to take us to the doctor's office or to take us to go shopping, if our vehicle could take care of it all itself. Think about the potential in cutting down traffic fatalities,
Yeah.
not only accidents, but fatalities. Some of the NHTSA research that I've looked at, 94% of traffic fatalities are caused by the human error.
Hmm.
And so if you take that out, and it's never going to be zero, nothing is zero, but how many lives could that save? You think about the difference that seatbelts have made in saving lives. Autonomous vehicles could easily surpass that within a very short period of time, making transportation easier. If we truly merge the way we're supposed to in the zipper technique, one car after another, as opposed to, as I like to say in Arkansas, we use the honk and flip method, because I honk, letting you know I want in, and then you flip me off, telling me to wait.
Yeah, that's a good system, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It gets us nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But let's take a step to the side and think about this. When we get on an airplane, the pilot's there to take off, and then they punch autopilot. And that technology's been around for decades. And then they take back over when we land. And so I know the skies aren't nearly as congested, though they're starting to get that way as our roads are. But there's a lot of good potential here. Think about agriculture. How much could be taken care of at night as opposed to only being able to work during the daylight? I mean, we already use GPS to monitor our boundaries. If we're using drone type technology, why can't we have autonomous combines and tractors, especially being in the South in the agricultural area?
Yeah.
Um, one of the funny stories I read when Russia first invaded the Ukraine and they attempted to steal, or someone attempted to steal a lot of John Deere equipment from the Ukraine. John Deere was able to remote kill all of that and created just a huge parking lot on their highway by being able to take and stop that.
Yeah.
Take it a step further. What about law enforcement? What if law enforcement no longer has to use the pit maneuver to try to stop somebody who is fleeing and evading and can bring a vehicle to a slow, safe stop? How many lives might that save if you keep fleeing vehicles from running red lights and running stoplights and putting other people and other pedestrians in harm's way?
Yeah. This all sounds great.
Hmm.
There's a but coming though. Is it just the legal, is it just the
It's just the
the
laws aren't there yet. I
yeah.
think again, the technology's there. Our laws are not ready.
Yeah.
Our roadway laws are not ready. And when we talk about commercial drivers,
Yeah.
uh, in Arkansas, Tyson and Walmart are already using short haul autonomous vehicles. California has bounced back and forth, and I think the most recent change to their law was that you have to have a human emergency driver behind the wheel. I think Gavin Newsom signed that in this past year
Hmm.
because they had looked to go to, all right, we're going to open up to driverless commercial motor vehicles, but I think they have hesitated and they want a human there just in case
Yeah.
for emergencies. But there are companies that remote operate as well, and that is an issue that I talk about in Arkansas. So if you have a remote operation of a commercial motor vehicle, so basically you got somebody sitting behind the wheel, as it looks like a PlayStation or an Xbox, steering wheel. They've got a gas pedal and a brake pedal for emergencies and taking over, but they've got monitors. And so they're monitoring the cameras as they remote operate or can overtake if necessary in an emergent situation of a commercial motor vehicle. Well, in Arkansas, if there is an accident and there's a fatality or there is a serious physical injury which could lead to fatality, our law requires blood to be drawn. So if that's the case and you have somebody who is operating out of New Jersey, who's going to draw the blood? And if they do draw it, who tests it? Whose laws apply? Do we apply New Jersey law or do we apply Arkansas law?
Yeah.
Where's jurisdiction for criminal or civil liability? Is it where the operator was located, or is it where the fatality occurred? I mean, these seem like pretty simple questions to answer, but right now, our laws are not there and not ready. And so that's not something I think Federal Motor Carrier can answer. I don't think it's something NHTSA can answer. I think each state is going to have to make a decision. Okay, if you're going to remote operate commercial motor vehicles in our state, these are the factors you have to agree to.
Yeah.
That is, yeah, that's crazy. One of the things I know Andrew had mentioned that you discussed was how an officer would develop probable cause to stop a vehicle that could be operated by somebody under the influence. Um, how would that work if somebody was, using the self-drive feature?
So there's a great video on YouTube that I show in all my presentations about a they were in California, and it was two law enforcement who were at a red light behind a cruise driverless vehicle. And so they get out and they walk up, and there's a pedestrian on the sidewalk who's filming it with his phone. And the officer walks up and he looks in, and of course, there's nobody in it. And he lifts the handle up and it's locked. And he says it's locked. Well, about that time, the light turns green and the taxi takes off.
Oh, yeah.
He's standing there and he runs back and he gets in his car. And since they are level 4 and they are being remote operated and monitored, somebody pulls the vehicle off the road and the law enforcement vehicle comes up behind it. And then 2 or 3 officers get out and they're all walking around it. But the vehicle's locked, the trunk is locked. And one of the hypotheticals I give is if I'm a human trafficker, if I'm a drug dealer, if I'm an arms dealer, I'm sending everything via autonomous vehicle right now. Because how do you, Andrew, develop probable cause to stop a vehicle? And if you do get it stopped with nobody there, how do you get probable cause to search? We talked about the level 1, my wife's 2017 Acura and lane assist. Well, when you think about impaired driving, most of the time, law enforcement starts an investigation for impaired driving because of weaving or crossing the center line or
Hmm.
driving too slow or driving too fast. And that 2017 technology takes that out of the picture. And so there are fewer opportunities for law enforcement to possibly find probable cause. And where the scary factor is, you may think, oh, well, that's good. Well, no, if they're still behind the wheel, they still have the ability to take over. Even though the car is assisting them, yeah, I don't like the way it's taking me home. So I'm going to take over and we're going to turn left here at this stop sign and go a different route. And I'm going to drive the rest of the way because I may be impaired. I may not be thinking correctly. Same thing all the way down to a level 4 car. As long as the car has the steering wheel, you've got the potential somebody can jump over from the passenger side or from the back seat to get behind the wheel and take over. And so those are the issues that we still have to play with.
This, I think we've gotten a good grasp of why at least this issue is so fascinating to me because it holds so much promise. There, as you pointed out, there is a safety component of this. If it works out, we could end up saving lives because it takes that human error out of it. You are focusing here, your presentation and what you're talking about here, about, again, where the holes are in the legal system. If you were to be appointed czar of autonomous technology law, or I don't know what the title would be, we'll come up with something catchier. But if you were to get in there and you were able to just sort of start putting laws on the books here and there, that you feel would put the correct restrictions and limits in place that would keep people safe and whatnot. What would that look like? I'm sure you've probably thought about this. What's the solution?
So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to brag on Missouri because Missouri has done away with looking at the term actual physical control. It's been years since that has been their focus on, in their case law, at least, on impaired driving cases. And they use the term drive or operate. And so different states may, like Arkansas is operate or be in actual physical control. Iowa is drive or be in actual physical control. Well, they've done away with actual physical control and they just look at drive or operate. And so if I am going to make a change or a suggestion to somebody, criminal laws are strictly construed. So if you look at the term drive, you look at the term operate, is that present tense or is that past tense? And that starts to come into play when you look at the different levels of the vehicle. I may have driven, but I'm not driving now. Just like we look at that commercial of the GMC Super Cruise. He was driving until he pushed the button and started it and then took his hands off the wheel. So if his hands aren't on the wheel, depending on how that state defines their law, he may not be driving, but he may have operated it. And so the way Missouri defines it, that's the first state I found this way, and I really like it. I would take it a step further to include past tense, drive or has driven, or operate or has the ability to operate. That would
Yeah.
be the global picture, the over-encompassing definition that I think would help law enforcement out to be able to potentially cut down on some of the arguments that we may have where technology has truly driven past our law.
Are there
How long,
others? Oh, go ahead,
sorry.
Ashley. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I'm just curious, how long do you think it'll take for laws to change to kind of reflect the changes autonomous vehicles are bringing? You said Missouri's, in a better spot than others, but how long do you think it'll take everyone to catch up, or will we,
Yeah.
catch up?
Actually, you've asked the question, and so I will answer the question for you. Sadly, it's probably going to take a fatality or two in each state before, oh, wait a minute, what do you mean? And a lot of times we are a whiplash society. And so we're over here, something happens, and all of a sudden we flip 180 degrees to the other side. And so something will happen, and they may say, oh, we don't need this is bad technology. We don't need autonomous vehicles. Our state, we're going to wipe them off. No, that cat's out of the bag at this point. I don't think you're putting it back in. And so sadly, I'm afraid that that's what's going to happen or have to happen before it gets enough attention that some of our legislators will want to pick it up and run with it.
Our
But I'm
states.
doing my best. I'm doing
Yeah.
my best to try to educate from state to state.
Yeah. And how is that being received in the rooms that you're talking to?
From scared to death
Yeah.
to seeing the potential, but understanding our limitations where we are in the law right now.
Yeah. 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 It's fascinating again, because I think we're in one of these periods of time where we know what the new thing is and we're seeing it slowly rolled out, but I don't think our minds can completely understand what this is going to look like. And you said by the end of this decade, you think this is going to be, these are going to be pretty much everywhere. And I think you're probably right.
Well, again, Mercedes is ready to roll out level three all over the country. We already see level four
Yeah.
operating uh, in California, Arizona, Texas. So I, I just don't think it's going to take that long for us to get there.
Yeah.
For the technology to be there. Now, for it to roll out, maybe different, but the technology I think will be there if it's not already there.
Yeah, for sure. Ashley, do you have any other
Oh, it's,
thoughts?
it's just absolutely fascinating. It's scary, but then, like you said, the potential that it has to be good, I don't know. Yeah. It's just,
Well, on the other side of this, again, for our listeners and for the trucking community, is there are serious safety concerns too about, the autonomous technology, and is it going to work? And are you going to get a car that makes you can kind of count on humans to do certain things at certain times. And these computers obviously are being programmed to make the right, quote unquote, right decision. But it's the uncertainty of whether that's actually going to happen or not, too, which is, I think, where a lot of the concern from the trucking industry comes, especially when you bring an 80,000 pound commercial
Mhm.
truck into the equation. That's that's where the concerns kind of start screaming at you a little bit.
Well, Andrew, one of the issues that I see people bring up is the ethical dilemma question. If the autonomous vehicle has to make a choice, does it hit the pedestrian? Does it hit the animal? Or does it avoid the animal crossing the road or the pedestrian walking across the road and hit another vehicle or create property damage? What is the choice that it makes? And then the potential civil liabilities for those developers or those manufacturers that would fall from that.
Yeah, like the trolley problem is kind of what you're
Exactly.
describing there.
Mercedes actually answered that in that their intent will hit you.
Yeah,
They're going to save the driver. I mean, that is in I was a car and driver, it was a car and driver interview, Hugo von Christopher, I believe, who's a I think that is correct. I don't
yeah,
want to misstate that, but he had said Mercedes made the decision they're going to protect their driver.
yeah. Yeah. Well, again, I think this is an interesting conversation. And again, your focus on the impaired driving aspect of all this, I think is fascinating too, because it raises these questions about whether we are really thinking about the things we need to think about. And I think the answer that you have found, from your research and talking to people is that we have not quite gotten there yet, but we need to start thinking about it. And that's a takeaway here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially from my state, which is, coming up 19 years behind the times, because that 2006
Hmm.
was the last case law dealing with key in the ignition. Pennsylvania is a bright line rule state as well. They are a key in the ignition and driver behind the wheel. Uh, Iowa calls themselves a totality of the circumstances state, but they require the engine to be running. So, actually, if the officer pulls up and the vehicle is not running, they've not seen the person drive. They may be behind the wheel, they may be, the engine may be running, but if they've not seen them drive, that is an argument for the defense to say that they're not in actual physical control.
Yeah. Again, Judge Fowler, fascinating conversation. Curious to see how this all play. I guess we have no choice but to see how this all plays out because it's going to happen in front of our very eyes. But really
Get your
appreciate
popcorn. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Really appreciate your time, appreciate your perspective, and we'll check in with you before the end of the decade to see
Yeah, for sure.
where
Not a
we
problem.
stand.
Anytime. Anytime. Thank you for having me.